Dominic calmly handed over his documents, keeping his hands visible at all times, just like his father had taught him. "Is there a problem?" Officer Dominic asked, his voice steady, though he could feel the tension creeping into his muscles. Roberts took his time, flipping through the documents without a word before glancing at Dominic with an appraising look, his eyes narrowing in subtle disdain. "Your windows are too dark. Can't see a damn thing in there," the officer muttered. "That's against the law in this state." Dominic raised an eyebrow. He knew for a fact that his windows were within the legal limit. "Officer, I had them checked just last month." "Step out of the vehicle," Roberts interrupted, his tone suddenly sharper, more menacing. Dominic hesitated, surprised by the sudden escalation. "Excuse me, I don't understand. What have I done?" Roberts smirked, his lips curling into something almost predatory. "You're already so black," he sneered. "I don't know what you could be hiding in there." The world seemed to stop for a moment, the weight of those words hanging in the air. Dominic's stomach twisted with a familiar churn of dread and anger, but he forced himself to stay calm. He knew where this was headed. He could feel it in the way Robert's hand hovered closer to his holster, in the way his eyes flickered with contempt. "Officer, please. There's no need for that. I've done nothing wrong." "I said, step out of the car," Roberts repeated, now unbuttoning the clasp on his holster. The unspoken threat lingered between them. Dominic, knowing that resistance would only worsen the situation, slowly opened the door and got out, his hands raised slightly in a gesture of compliance. He could feel the gazes of passing drivers, but none stopped. This was America. People watched, but they didn't interfere. The second Dominic was on his feet, Robert shoved him roughly against the car. "What are you doing?" Dominic protested, trying to look over his shoulder. The officer's grip on his arms was tight, unyielding. "You like to argue with cops?" Roberts growled, slamming Dominic's face against the cold metal hood. "Get down on the ground." "Why? What have I done?" Dominic's voice cracked, not from fear, but from the deep well of frustration he'd buried inside for so long. He felt the press of knees into his back, forcing him onto the asphalt. His skin scraped against the rough ground as Roberts pinned him, handcuffs clinking ominously. "Shut up. I'm arresting you because you look like trouble," Roberts muttered under his breath as he tightened the cuffs. Dominic was too stunned to respond, the familiar humiliation washing over him like a tidal wave. It didn't matter how successful he was, how kind, how clean his record. None of that mattered to someone like Sergeant Roberts. As Roberts read him his rights, Dominic's mind raced. He needed to call EVA. He needed to get a lawyer. He knew exactly what was happening, and it had nothing to do with tinted windows. Later that night, after the bail was posted and the bitter sting of the arrest had subsided into a dull ache, EVA stormed into her father's office. Chief Jackson sat behind his desk, the symbol of law enforcement in their town, his badge gleaming in the dim office light. His face was hard, unreadable. As EVA approached, her anger barely contained. "I'm not here to chit-chat, Dad," EVA began, slamming her hands on his desk. "We need to talk about what's going on in your department." Chief Jackson didn't flinch. He folded his arms, leaning back in his chair, eyes studying his daughter with a cold detachment. "What are you talking about, EVA?" "Dominic was arrested today." "For nothing," she exclaimed, her voice shaking with frustration. "Racial discrimination is getting worse, and it's happening under your watch. You need to do something." Jackson sighed, rubbing his temples. "Eva, you need to calm down. This isn't about race. If Dominic got arrested, then I'm sure he did something to warrant it." Eva's face flushed with disbelief. "He did nothing. He was pulled over because of his skin color, Dad. The officer literally told him he was too black to be trusted. Can't you see what's happening here?" Her father's gaze hardened, his jaw tightening. "Look, Eva, I've been doing this job for 30 years. I know the patterns. These people, they bring trouble. It's not discrimination, it's pattern recognition. We deal with the same types over and over. It's just the way it is. EVA recoiled as if struck. Pattern recognition? You mean racial profiling? Call it what you want, Jackson replied, his voice even and unaffected. The numbers don't lie. Most of the crimes in this town are committed by black people, right? Is that what you're about to say? EVA cut him off, her voice trembling with fury. You've been using your power to reinforce stereotypes and justify discrimination. Dominic is your son-in-law, and you still can't see beyond his skin. What about the others? What about all the innocent people your officers are targeting? Jackson's eyes flickered with something darker, something colder. It's not your place to question how I run my department, EVA. I've kept this town safe for years. Justice isn't always clean. Sometimes you have to make hard decisions. EVA stepped back, shaking her head in disbelief. This isn't justice, Dad. This is hatred. You're punishing people for the color of their skin. Dominic isn't a criminal, and neither are most of the people your officers are harassing. Jackson stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Enough, EVA. You're too close to this because of Dominic. You're letting your emotions get in the way. I'm not letting my emotions get in the way, EVA shouted, tears of frustration welling in her eyes. I'm trying to make you see what's right in front of you. This is systemic racism, and it's destroying lives. It's destroying my life. Don't you care? For a moment, there was silence. Jackson's face softened slightly, but the hardness in his eyes remained. Eva, I love you. But this is my job. I've seen too much to be naive about how the world works. EVA shook her head, backing toward the door. No, Dad. You've seen too much to know what's right anymore. As she left the office, the weight of her father's words pressed heavily on her chest. The divide between them felt like an insurmountable canyon, widened by years of ingrained prejudice and refusal to change. She had hoped for a different outcome, but deep down, she had known this conversation would end like this. Outside, EVA dialed Dominic's number. It rang once, twice, and then she heard his voice, weary but strong. We need to fight this, she whispered, her heart heavy with the realization that she might have to fight her father too. The kitchen was bathed in the soft, late afternoon glow. EVA sat at the dinner table, her fingers idly tracing the rim of her coffee cup as her father, Chief Jackson, sat across from her. His uniform hung on the chair behind him, a reminder of his power and authority. They had been avoiding the inevitable conversation for days, but it couldn't wait any longer. Chief Jackson leaned forward, his voice a mix of frustration and disbelief. Eva, I don't understand what's going on in that head of yours. You could have had anyone. Mark was a good man, from a good family. But instead, you chose Dominic. Eva felt the familiar sting of her father's words. She had heard this before, but it never stopped hurting. Her father never said black outright, but the venom in his tone was unmistakable. It was as if he spat the name Dominic like it was something vile on his tongue. Dad, Dominic is a good man, EVA said calmly, though her hands gripped the cup a little tighter. He's kind, successful, and he loves me. Chief Jackson scoffed, leaning back in his chair. Dominic. Even the name sounds like a criminal. It's like you're trying to drag our family's name through the mud, marrying someone like him. EVA blinked, momentarily stunned by the harshness of his words. She had known her father held racist views, but this level of bluntness, this audacity, still caught her off guard. Someone like him, she echoed. Dad, Dominic has done nothing wrong. He's a business owner, he's law-abiding, and he's treated me better than anyone ever has. Why can't you see that? Jackson narrowed his eyes, his hands coming together in a mock display of thoughtfulness. I see a man who doesn't belong in our family. I see a man who will bring nothing but trouble because of the color of his skin. Do you know how people look at you, Eva? A white woman married to a black man? It's shameful. Eva felt a heat rising in her chest, the bubbling of anger she had tried to suppress. Shameful? No, Dad. What's shameful is how you're speaking right now. What's shameful is your inability to see past Dominic's skin color and recognize who he truly is. You're the one who's stuck in the past, not me. Jackson slammed his hand down on the table, making the coffee cups rattle. Don't you lecture me about the past. I've served this community for over 30 years. I know what I'm talking about, and I know men like Dominic. They're trouble, Eva. You may not see it now, but you will. Eva stood, her body trembling with fury. You don't know him, and you don't know me if you think I'm going to stand by and let you disrespect my husband. She grabbed her bag from the chair, turning toward the door. I won't let you poison our family with your hate. As she left the kitchen, her father's voice followed her, sharp and cold. I won't apologize for trying to protect you, Eva. One day you'll see that I'm right. But Eva didn't look back. She couldn't. If she did, she feared the love she had for her father might crumble into something unrecognizable. Days had passed since their argument, and Eva hadn't heard from her father. She didn't expect him to change, but the silence had weighed heavily on her. Dominic, as always, had been patient and supportive, offering her the space to process her feelings. He knew how much her father's opinions still hurt, even if Eva tried to hide it. It was late in the afternoon when her phone buzzed. The screen lit up with her father's name, a name that now sent a mix of dread and hope through her. Eva hesitated for a moment, staring at the screen before answering. Dad. Eva. Chief Jackson's voice was calm, almost soft. I've been thinking about what you said, and about Dominic. Eva's heart skipped a beat. She had longed for this moment, a sign that her father might finally be willing to see reason, to open his eyes. Okay, she replied cautiously. I realize I've been harsh, Jackson continued. Maybe I've let my position and my experiences cloud my judgment. I know how important your anniversary is coming up, and I've been thinking, maybe I could make dinner for you and Dominic. To apologize. Eva's grip on the phone tightened. Her father's tone was measured, but there was something about the way he said apologize that felt off. Insincere, almost rehearsed. Could it be real? She wanted to believe him, but after years of witnessing his deeply ingrained prejudice, she wasn't sure. That's nice of you, Dad, Eva said, though her voice was tinged with suspicion. But why now? Why this sudden change? There was a pause on the other end, long enough for Eva to question if she had pushed too hard. But then her father spoke again, his voice firm but not defensive. Because I've been thinking about what you said. Maybe I don't understand Dominic the way you do. I want to try, Eva. I owe you that. Eva's heart ached with the hope that maybe, just maybe, her father had finally seen the error of his ways, but a small voice in the back of her mind urged caution. Chief Jackson was not a man who easily admitted defeat, and his sudden shift in demeanor felt too abrupt. Okay, she said slowly. We'll come by. But Dad, if this is just another way for you to hurt Dominic, I won't forgive you. Not this time. Her father's sigh was heavy. I understand. I'll see you both tonight. As she hung up the phone, Eva stared at the screen, her thoughts racing. Dominic